And hello, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks so much for streaming with us today. Live pictures for you as the scramble to clear a path after a severe winter storm leaves drivers stranded for hours on I-95 in Virginia. Among those trapped, Virginia Senator Tim Kaine. His 2-hour drive to the Capitol, more than 19 hours. A wreck with multiple tractor trailers backing up the interstate for miles. Drivers forced to sleep in their cars as temperatures drop below zero. The Department of Homeland Security out with a new warning ahead of the 1-year anniversary of the January 6th attack, alerting law enforcement around the country that violent offenders will try to exploit the upcoming anniversary to promote or possibly commit violence. And it's the end of an era. Get ready to say goodbye if you're still using a BlackBerry. The once popular device will stop working today. But we begin with the latest on the fight against COVID. The U.S. setting a new global record in this pandemic with more than 1 million new COVID cases reported in 24 hours, which likely includes those backlog cases from holiday testing. ABC's Trevor Ault has the latest.
A stunning new daily infection record. More than 1 million new cases reported Monday alone. Most states reporting a backlog from the weekend, but the total is nearly double the previous daily record. And now vaccine boosters are likely rolling out to even younger Americans. FDA now authorizing Pfizer booster shots for 12 to 15-year-olds and recommending everybody 12 and up originally vaccinated with Pfizer get their booster after 5 months instead of 6. The CDC is expected to sign off midweek, and shots could be available as early as Thursday.
It's more important now than ever for all teens to go out there and get all 3 of their vaccinations.
325,000 children tested positive for the virus just last week, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. And more than 100,000 infected Americans are now hospitalized, more than double the total from early November.
The sickest of the sick that we are seeing now are the patients that are not vaccinated.
Some will even ask that they can be vaccinated tonight, but I'll have to let them know that it's too late.
Some of the sharpest increases in hospital admissions are recorded in the Southeast, with the number of newly admitted patients there jumping 64% between Christmas and the New Year. The influx could get worse following the holiday, but in New York, hospitalizations are already back to levels not seen since last January.
We're not in a good place. I'm going to be really honest with you. This is the winter surge we predicted, and we fully anticipate, on top of the surge that's already been ongoing, that there's going to be another wave that's occurring as a result of these holidays.
Starting today, the state will require hospitals report a breakdown of how many people are hospitalized because of COVID symptoms and how many are testing positive while there for other treatments.
The sheer numbers of people infected are high, but I want to see whether or not the hospitalizations correlate with that.
And scientists are now tracking a new variant that's infected a dozen people in southern France that doctors say appears to be heavily mutated, but it's been around for about a month and it's yet to make a big impact. And remember, most new variants do sputter out, but scientists, of course, have their eye out for it. Kira?
All right, Trevor Ault, thank you so much. Meanwhile, the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics are just a month away, and China is already facing a serious test of its zero COVID policy. Athletes will be isolated in what organizers are calling a closed loop during the games, and they will live, train, and compete in a very strict bubble. But China is dealing with COVID outbreaks in several cities, and the government is implementing strict measures, including severe lockdowns, like in Xi'an, a city of some 13 million people. Foreign correspondent Maggie Rulli joining us now live from London with more. Maggie, so good to see you.
Kira, always good to see you as well.
Well, as we enter in this new year, you know, China's zero COVID strategy has been successful, controversial so far as well. What kind of challenges do you see the Olympics presenting here?
Yeah, Kira, you know, China, as you said, sometimes controversial, but also so far successful. They're really one of the last countries still chasing this idea of zero COVID, but the Olympics will be their biggest challenge yet. Starting today, they've even launched their pre-Olympics bubble. This is well underway. They're getting ready to welcome 25,000 people, Olympic officials and athletes from all over the world. They haven't been tested like this yet, but they say they're confident they can do it. You know, this bubble is going to be very strict, Kira, stricter than even what we saw with the Summer Games in Tokyo. Some of what they've told us so far, everyone in the bubble is going to be tested with a PCR test every single day. They've told athletes they don't want them cheering for other athletes. Instead, only clapping is allowed. And get this, they're even saying they're going to separate the trash. So keep the trash from people in the bubble separate from the general population. They are really doing everything they can to make this Olympic works because for many people, Chinese officials, they say this is their chance to prove to the rest of the world why their COVID-0 policy is going to work. But Kira, it is going to be difficult to pull off.
So what if an athlete tests positive?
Yeah, well, just like anything else, this is strict, Kira. Right now, they're saying if an athlete tests positive, they face then a quarantine of up to 21 days, potentially even 5 weeks. So this is quite a severe for many athletes. It's part of the reason why the NHL came out saying they don't want any players from their league going to the Olympics, which was heartbreaking for many of those players. But they said that potential for a quarantine was just too severe. They'd miss the March playoffs. So again, up to 21 days, 5 weeks. It's a pretty harsh quarantine for anyone who tests positive.
So what do you think, Maggie? How big of a threat is Omicron, given that it appears to be the most contagious variant so far?
Yeah, Kira, this is the biggest issue right now. You know, the games are coming at a time where we're seeing Omicron surge around the world. You mentioned those numbers you're seeing in the States right now. This is a huge battle for a country that hasn't seen, you know, many outbreaks. You mentioned some of the outbreaks they are facing right now. That one city of about 13 million under a Wuhan-style lockdown. They had about 1,600 cases. Now, that sounds like nothing compared to America, but this is the largest outbreak China has seen since the start of the pandemic, and it was not even from Omicron yet. So just imagine, we know how easily this new variant spreads, and keeping it separate with a bubble, it is going to be so difficult. China says they're confident, but gosh, we're 1 month out, Kira. Still so much unknown, and everyone is going to be watching these games.
Yeah, another year of a lot of unknowns. Yeah. Maggie Rulli, thanks so much. Good to see you from London. Well, coming up, potentially defining day for Prince Andrew. His legal team facing a judge as his accuser's settlement with Jeffrey Epstein is unsealed. And welcome back. Lawyers for Britain's Prince Andrew are set for a court hearing today. He faces sex assault allegations from a woman who says she was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, newly unsealed court documents are shedding new light on a settlement agreement between Epstein and the accuser as the royal family faces growing pressure over the prince. Foreign correspondent James Longman has the latest for us from London.
Secret court documents revealed in the long-standing civil case between Prince Andrew and his accuser, Virginia Roberts-Giuffre. Andrew's legal team have unsealed the 2009 settlement Giuffre reached with sex predator Jeffrey Epstein. It shows she received $500,000 and that she would not involve parties associated with Epstein, including, quote, royalty, a term referenced in the original lawsuit. Now 38, Giuffre claims she was trafficked for sex by Jeffrey Epstein and accuses Prince Andrew of having sex with her on several occasions and in multiple locations, including New York, starting when she was 17. These are claims he's denied many times.
I've said consistently and frequently that we never had any sort of sexual contact.
Attorneys for the Duke of York argue those documents should prevent him from being sued and exclude him from further litigation. It's not the only argument the Duke's legal team is using to try and get the case dismissed. They say Giuffre lives in Australia and not the US, where the suit was filed, and they've requested a delay in the evidence Giuffre's attorney has tried to present. In an interview with the BBC, the Duke of York admitted to having known Epstein through his longtime friend, now convicted sex offender, Ghislaine Maxwell, who he met in 1999.
I'd known her since she was at university in the UK. And it would be, to some extent, a stretch to say that as it were, we were close friends.
The interview was part of an extended one-on-one BBC special, where Prince Andrew said he'd stayed in Epstein's New York City property even after Epstein was convicted of sex trafficking. And it was this response to allegations made by Giuffre that made it a now infamous exchange.
I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time. And that was, oh, actually, yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at.
Andrew has denied Giuffre's claims, and his attorneys have called her lawsuit baseless, meant to achieve another payday. It's not known when the judge will make a decision on this, but the pressure does just keep mounting on Prince Andrew. And whatever the outcome, I think it's unclear when or if he'll return to his duties as a member of the royal family. Kira?
Well, we will definitely follow it. James, thanks so much. So what does all of this mean for Prince Andrew and the royal family? Earlier on Good Morning America, George Stephanopoulos spoke to Chief Legal Analyst Dan Abrams and also a royal expert, Victoria Murphy, about what's next.
Any serious chance that he can dismiss this case?
Well, look, some of these arguments are not frivolous arguments being made by Prince Andrew. It's probably a long shot that he'll be able to get it dismissed at this point. But this fundamental argument as to whether he should be covered by the settlement agreement is actually a really interesting argument, because in her lawsuit, she had said that these were the people who abused her, including, quote, royalty. Then in the settlement agreement, it was supposed to apply to all potential defendants. And Prince Andrew's team is saying, well, wait a second. She referred to royalty, clearly referring to Prince Andrew there, and that was supposed to be a settlement for all potential defendants. That should cover him. It's a bit of a stretch because he isn't specifically mentioned in this. There's no reference to Prince Andrew. So it's not going to be an easy argument to win, but there are real legal issues to resolve.
It's also a little tricky because if the argument is, wait, I'm the royalty in that case, then he's kind of implicated in the whole case, maybe not legally, but publicly.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, but remember, the legal is very different from the public. His position would be, I'm not conceding that any of this is true. What he's saying is, as a legal matter, if you are arguing that I am responsible here, I am responding by saying, I'll accept that for the purposes of the legal argument and tell you then, therefore, I am covered by the settlement agreement. It hurts him in the court of public opinion. It doesn't really hurt him in the court of law, because lawyers do this all the time, where they say, look, we're not conceding it, but even if it were true, here's our legal argument.
And Victoria, when it comes to the court of public opinion, how much would dismissal even help Prince Andrew at this point?
Well, I think that's very interesting, George. And yes, you have all these legal manoeuvrings going on, but of course, in the background, you have the court of public opinion. And let's not forget that it was public opinion and that negative reaction to his BBC TV interview in 2019 about Epstein that ultimately led to him stepping back from his royal role. And that was way before Virginia Giuffre had even filed this particular civil case against him. If his lawyers are able to successfully get this case thrown out, then it will obviously be a legal win, and it will avoid the worst case scenario as far as his reputation goes, which is obviously him being found at fault. That's the worst thing that can happen for his reputation. But what it doesn't do, I think, is completely turn things around for him. For a lot of people, him tackling the allegations themselves head on and successfully doing that is now what is required in order to turn this around completely as far as his reputation goes.
Any sense of what's going on with the royal family right now?
Well, the royal family is, of course, acutely aware of how damaging this is. And we can see that from the fact that they have totally erased him from the public face of the monarchy. They've done everything they can to distance themselves. He hasn't appeared publicly with the royal family at all in the last 2 years, apart from at his own father's funeral. And the fact that he didn't even appear in his own daughter's wedding photographs that were released by the palace, I think tells us everything we need to know about how toxic they perceive his presence to be for them. However, there's only so much they can do, because ultimately he is still the Queen's son, and this is very much for that reason still going to continue to play out as a royal story.
And finally, Dan, what exactly is going to happen in court today?
Well, this is not going to be an argument about the facts. It's not going to be an argument about whether this is true. This is going to be a very technical legal argument on a number of fronts, where the prince is trying to get the case dismissed, where the plaintiff is saying the case should continue. And this is going to be a critical ruling, because if the case is dismissed at this point, case is over. If the case moves forward, that's terrible news for Prince Andrew on a number of fronts.
And our thanks to George, Dan, and Victoria for that interview and analysis. Well, coming up, we are traveling to Rocky Mount, Virginia, a small town that's been deeply divided by the January 6th riot 1 year ago this week. How the community is moving forward right after this break. Welcome back. I'm Kira Phillips. So glad you're streaming with us. Well, as we approach the one-year anniversary of the deadly riot at the U.S. Capitol, we're looking at the impact that day made on communities around the country. And today, we're heading to a small town just 260 miles south of D.C. It's the home of 2 of the 3 police officers who federal authorities have charged in the storming of the Capitol building. Their involvement has deeply divided the town, and it's resurfaced long-running debates over race, history, and politics. So where do they even go from here? ABC's Devin Dwyer went out there to find out.
The chaos that stunned the world on January 6th had roots in sleepy southern towns like Rocky Mount, Virginia, in the quiet foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where moonshine and bluegrass are king and symbols of Donald Trump and the Confederacy are immortal.
We just accept it and we just take it for what it is. This is their land, this is their county, and we just live in it.
Rocky Mount is predominantly white and politically conservative. The passions poured out in the Capitol riot were no surprise here, but the involvement of 2 of their own sent shockwaves through the town. Jacob Fracker and Thomas Robertson, seen here making an obscene statement in a selfie from inside the Capitol, are 2 of just 3 active police officers that federal authorities have charged for their alleged actions that day.
I think it was actually shocking. Everyone I've talked to was totally shocked that those 2 men would do that.
On social media, the Rocky Mount cops, both military veterans, celebrated their participation. Robertson saying they attacked the government to stand up for their rights. Fracker saying on Facebook, "I can protest for what I believe in."
I could not believe what I was seeing. Like, seriously.
Rocky Mount native Bridget Craighead says she considered the officers family.
But we were out here in the front.
It was months earlier that they stood in solidarity at the town's first protest for Black Lives Matter. Cell phone video capturing the cops dancing with the demonstrators.
They were killing the electric slide. I mean, I'm gonna say. But I really felt like we were the example of what a community needs to do to get through this type of trauma.
Do you consider them friends?
We were. And when we saw each other, hey, how you do? This is a small town.
But January 6th was a betrayal of that friendship, she says. Seen in their participation at the Capitol, elements of racism and white power. Craighead led calls to get the officers fired.
They needed to be exposed because it's not only just them. They're just the body of the evil here. It's deeper than the 2 officers.
If you got some time with Jacob Fracker and Thomas Robertson today and you sat down with them face to face, what would you tell them?
Was it worth it? Was it worth it?
Robertson and Fracker have pleaded not guilty to federal charges of disorderly and disruptive conduct and obstruction of Congress, insisting they didn't participate in violence that day and that their message is not incompatible with support for Black lives.
They both were very polite gentlemen, and they were both town police officers. However, it is unfortunate that they are no longer employees of the town.
Tyler Lee considers the now former officers his friends. At 29, he's the youngest person ever elected to Rocky Mount City Council, and he spent the past year trying to urge his neighbors to turn the page.
I think we have to leave the stuff in a year ago, because if we keep bringing up what happened a year ago, it's still going to keep punching us in the mouth, right? If we can just teach compassion, communication, and how to balance a checkbook, those 3 things, I think you're golden.
But beneath the surface, emotions are still raw.
People like to fantasize, I call it, saying, you know, it's a good old southern town and all the families get along and everybody's happy, etc. And I call that the fantasy.
School board member Penny Blue says the riot resurfaced divisions over race, history, and politics that date to the Civil War and rekindled her disgust with Confederate symbols like this memorial statue, which was erected just 10 years ago after an older version was damaged.
I don't admire the Confederate dead.
Do you see what happened on 1/6 as an extension of the Confederacy?
I do. It was an insurrection. And that's what these people did. It was an insurrection. Trump did not radicalize these people. He took advantage of what was already here. When I say here, I mean in Franklin County in America.
This part of the area is dominated by Trump's supporters. He still looms large here, even a year after leaving office.
Voters here last fall broke heavily for pro-Trump Republican Glenn Youngkin for governor in a campaign dominated by debate over critical race theory. The town also tapping a new, more conservative representative to the State House of Delegates, a former member of Trump's 2020 legal team who fought the election results.
You must never have been cheated by somebody. Some of these people will go to their grave holding that grudge forever.
Ren Williams, whose family has deep ties to this community, faced off against Bridget Craighead in November and won in a landslide.
Church and God is a big thing for us. History, as you said, we're steeped in history, and we feel as though people who don't understand our way of life or they don't resonate or connect with us, they dismiss it and they think it's less than.
Did you consider the events of 1/6 at the U.S. Capitol an attack on the government? How do you view what took place there?
I personally view it as a riot, and I condemn all rioting. I condemn what we saw in January 6th and going into the Capitol and things like that. Go out into these small towns and actually see if anybody is talking about January 6th anymore, because they're not. They're not discussing it.
Williams is convinced Trump will run for president again. Others in the community wait anxiously for word on his intentions. At Rocky Mount United Methodist, the political divide is evident in the pews.
If you have any hope of healing, you got to talk about what's hurting.
So how do you bridge the divide between those two groups of people who sit in your pews?
I tend to believe that honesty is the best policy. Ripping off the Band-Aids, the best way to move forward. So we talk about it. We're unafraid here.
A willingness to keep talking to each other, that's one rare area of common ground we found in the divided town.
We're bringing up all these hurtful topics and subjects, not to rub it, in your face or to bring up the past, but we have to bring up the past to learn from it and to move on and to heal.
At the end of the day, we all may disagree, but you still have to be able to stick your hand out and face it as a champ.
As both sides of the debate in Rocky Mount say it's faith that will see the town through.
To grow some flowers, you got to disturb the dirt. So this has been a disturbing year, just like 2020 was. But I believe in growth, and it comes through sometimes seeing things messed up for a little bit.
For ABC News, I'm Devin Dwyer in Rocky Mount, Virginia.
And so much thanks to our Devin. And ABC News will have live full coverage of the one-year anniversary of the attack on our nation's capital this Thursday. You can watch the new ABC News documentary, Homegrown Standoff to Rebellion, examining the events leading up to the attack tomorrow on Hulu. And then Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on ABC News Live. Well, I'm Kira Phillips. Thank you so much for joining us today. The news continues on ABC News Live with all the context and analysis you expect from us. And I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. with Terry Moran.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.